Good morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my new friend, Nina Boski. Hi, Nina. How are you?
Hey, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, well, I am fascinated with what you're doing. You are, you are very multifaceted, multi-talented. We have a lot in common. It'll be fun to play after
Yes.
we talk. But what I was alerted to was that you're working on a project about Marilyn Monroe and her 60th anniversary, her tragedy anniversary, I guess is what, and all the details about it. And what fascinated me about that is I'm also working with an author that did that with Paul McCartney.
Mm.
And so there's all these truths that are emerging right now, and you are part of that. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you got started and so interested in this subject?
Well, it's a really interesting way. I wasn't a fan of Marilyn Monroe. I didn't dislike her. I just didn't know that much about her.
Uh-huh.
Quite honest with you, when I got into this, I didn't really care that much. And I don't mean that meanly. She wasn't the focus. It was
Uh-huh.
a project. I was working, I actually had my own, I was one of the first 5 shows on YouTube. So I was LifeBites Live back in the day when they had just started video. So it was really kind of an interesting pioneering experience, let's just say. But somebody had come to me because I had a strong marketing in radio and television and digital at that time that said, hey, I've got this author that has a book around Marilyn Monroe, and maybe you can help him launch it. It was for the 50th anniversary of her death. And so I was like, oh, this is really cool. And so at that time, I was doing a weekly radio show, getting all these authors and everybody else to send me stuff. And so I would power read because there was sometimes I had up to 4 authors or experts. So you didn't have a lot of time to read every book. So I was thought, I'm going to read this book and kind of get through it. And it read so much like a movie that I started on a Sunday morning and finished it, 4 hours later.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
enthralled me and it read like a movie. So when I met with him, the author, I said, have you ever thought about making this into a movie? And he said, actually, there is a script to it. And it was bought by HBO. And they decided, even though they optioned it, they decided to go with the biopic version. So his book at the time was No City for Dreaming. It moved into a movie called Goodnight Marilyn. And the birth of my Marilyn experience started. And so what really started to get me more fascinated though with her wasn't the movie, the thrill. It's a thriller noir and it takes fact and fiction. And it really, see, I used to deal with marketing movies. And so one of the things that I would always be concerned with was what's the emotional connection to a movie like this?
Yeah.
And I love the theme because whether you are in Hollywood or you have your own other dream, all of our dreams, sometime in our life, we have to ask ourselves, how far am I willing to go to have my dream come true?
Right.
So in
Wow.
this movie, it really questions that. And then it also speaks to everybody's dream in this movie is being threatened from Marilyn Monroe all the way to the fictional characters. So it's a fascinating movie, but you walk out of it going to yourself, well, what actually did happen to her?
Right.
So that started my journey with a podcast the same name, Goodnight Marilyn Radio. And organically, it was the weirdest thing. All of a sudden, these experts, really high, well-known experts, from Dr. Cyril Wecht to Dr. Michael Baden, all of a sudden they're on board as the forensic pathologist. And now we're doing the investigation of what happened to Marilyn. I didn't seek out to do it. It kind of came to me.
Yep.
And so that's how I started to get fascinated. But to answer your question more specifically, this is really, really wild. I've been a media and entertainment girl for many years, but my company gets people thinking and inspired about their life. So for me to do just a movie, right, that is thriller noir, okay, but it doesn't speak to my soul and why I'm here.
Right.
What started to come out of this project was a real love for this woman who is a human being like all of us, who has gotten exploited over the decades. And so how can we tell her story and tell it truthfully, without all of the rumor sensationalism that's out there. And also, particularly right now in this day in time that we're living in, is really shed light on mental health and addiction and the correlation between the two. So that answers why I'm doing this.
Perfect. Well, I understand, and the opportunity now is for people to see the truth. Before, I think a lot of the rose-colored glasses are off, and there's like follow the money or follow the thing or follow these relationships. And I'm just fascinated with all of this because you think of all the people that came to California when Marilyn did. My mother was in that group. She grew up in San Francisco, but she was in her first husband was part of one of the owners of Warner Brothers.
Oh.
And so she was, I've got pictures of her, was always smoking a cigarette and, the glamorous thing. So I look at all of that and I know like what Lucille Ball and some of these women had to do to get where they were. It's not pretty. It's not. I mean, and she was Norma Ray, right?
Norma Jean.
Norma Jean, yeah. So she was, I mean, where did she even get the inspiration to do that?
Well, I think that's where people don't realize that the character Marilyn Monroe is not the person Marilyn Monroe or Norma Jean. And I think that was the most eye-opening experience I had with her. Because to be quite honest with you, I thought the person you saw on the screen was kind of like who she was.
Yeah.
The thing you're going to understand about Marilyn when you get to know her, if people have just been reading superficial books and maybe watching a few documentaries, is she's always portrayed as a tragic figure. And yet, when you really look at everything she overcame, yeah, she only lived 36 years, but she was a seeker. She was a very deep soul. She spoke from her heart, her vulnerability. There was a very tragicness to her childhood, and nobody should have a childhood like this. But when you think about her childhood, her mom had mental illness, and then her father never acknowledged her, even up until when she was a famous movie star.
Wow.
Do with her. So you start that kind of beginnings. And then her mother couldn't take care of her because of her mental illness. And so she was in foster homes and orphanages, probably 11 or 12. She was physically and sexually abused.
Of course.
And it was a huge, she was left alone quite a bit. But one of the things that she did with one of the people that she was staying with is they were vaudeville actors. And it was in Hollywood, and they'd be up to all hours of the night. And so in the morning, she would just get up and go to the movies by herself, a little 7-year-old, go to the movies by herself, staying there from morning to night, watching mainly Jean Harlow movies at that time, loved Jean Harlow. And she started to get this vision. And so when she was in the orphanage, it was closest to what is now Paramount Studios, but was RKO back in the day. She would look out the orphanage window and say, oh my gosh, she would dream a bigger life. So you think about the resilience and the ability to overcome and visualize her future into being that movie star on the screen, being that actress that finally she used to look at Clark Gable as her father figure, because her father looked a little bit like Clark Gable. So she would think of him as her father. And then all of a sudden, here she is years later at a Hollywood dinner dancing with Clark Gable, king of Hollywood. And here she is. He called her the queen of Hollywood at that time. So think about all of that. There are some people that live 100 years old and never do what she's done in her short life. So, and she, today we have much more ability to take care of, although it's epidemic proportions, of stars. Back then, they would lace your B12 shot with heavy barbiturates and call it that you're helping somebody. So, she was a seeker of getting help. The problem is she just didn't get the right help because of the time period she was living in. And also she became an addict and became, ability to to not be able to sleep and then take the pills to be able to help her sleep, then help take
Oh.
things to help her get up, all that kind of stuff. So
Okay. So you you got the intuition to go deeper on this. And do you feel you're psychic and intuitive? I hope it's okay to say that.
yeah.
Do you feel like she's guiding you?
I will say this: anybody that's associated with the Marilyn project or projects, she's got just as big of spirit on the other side as she does that she did here. So she will let you know whether she likes something or doesn't like something. In some ways, yes, guiding me, but also it's she's an interesting energy to pick up on the other side. So yes, she will make your presence known, and then what'll happen is that she never really leaves you, so to speak. And so it's kind of like when she was on Earth. She hasn't left us yet, really.
Yeah.
So it's no different, if that makes any sense.
Well, the thing is that we idolize, we create heroes out of Hollywood and out of sports, and here we didn't really know. We have this facade, this almost costume. That's what I call it. When I was in corporate, you put your costume on, and then went to work, and then took it off when you came home. Now all of that is like, forget it. This is just it.
Yeah.
But you think of what she had to do. Again, that's this possibility thinking that she had, where she, law of attraction, saw herself with Clark Gable and then actualized it. That's powerful, and all of us are learning that we could do that now. So I mean, it's just another example.
Pioneer, really. And also, you mentioned Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball, although associated with her husband, Marilyn Monroe as well, both of them started their own film companies.
That's right.
Great business mind, extremely smart. Marilyn Monroe was. Most people don't look at it that way because she plays this dingy character that's kind of like this, the caricature that she created, but very different than what you might imagine. Very, very deep soul, tortured soul to some degree. Her writings speak to that. But I always laugh when probably this year it'll happen too. You get the Star magazine or something coming out with this quote, Red Diary. And, they make, finally found the Red Diary. And then you read what they're saying that's in the Red Diary. And it's not at all the way that she would talk. Very superficial, almost like you're a 5-year-old, not a 5-year-old, but let's say a teenage girl having a crush, let's say on JFK. She would never write like they make it. So if you see a Red Diary, article coming out, first of all, it's a big rumor. So book of poems.
Okay, so are you I'd like to know more about how you're going to do a docuseries. How many episodes are you going to do?
Yeah. So it's a 6-part docuseries.
Okay.
But right now we have a podcast out called Behind the Icon, and it's a dramatic podcast. So it deals with the all of Marilyn's life. So we have a beautiful and talented actress named Erin Gavin who played her on stage, who plays her in this podcast, and she really has the essence of Marilyn, that vulnerability, which is really great, particularly in a dramatic. The reason why we did that is because you and I can talk about her all day long, but to capture it, to create that sense of that she's a human being. Yeah, she was a very famous movie star. She was a sex goddess to some degree. Both men and women loved her, which is very unusual given the fact that I'm sure some wives back in the day were like, oh my gosh, there's Marilyn Monroe. I hope she doesn't look at my husband, right? But she had that ability to be able to speak to things that is more human oriented, right, and talk about those things. Whereas the 1940s, 50s, and even into the 60s, you didn't talk about child abuse. You didn't talk about sexual abuse. You didn't talk about civil rights. She stood up to studio heads and said, like in this new episode that we just launched called Soul Sisters, It speaks to Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe's special bond. She supported her career. Ella Fitzgerald acknowledged her about doing that, but it went even deeper. She stood up to the Fox studio head, Daryl Zanuck, and basically said, look, if you're going to fire people because I'm being seen with, at that time, they'd called Negroes, right?
Yeah.
She said, no, if he goes, I go. The other thing is in the Hotel Del, they would have assistants and travel maids that would come with them. She had two African American assistants at that time. One of them was Ida May. She was filming Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
Hotel Del back and then did not allow Negroes into the hotel, 1958. So she said to it was the showrunner, somebody on the crew that was dealing with the hotel, and said, basically, guess what? Tell the hotel that there are, in this innovative movie at the time, Some Like It Hot, really bringing it out there in terms of gender roles, right? Because you got Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon dressing up as women. Jack Lemmon ends up marrying a guy at the end. That's pretty pushing the envelope back in 1958. She just basically said, and I know that you're going to want to be able to open up this hotel to everybody. So basically Marilyn Monroe will not be sending anybody away. And that if she's going to be on this picture, she's going to stay at this hotel. So is Ida May.
And they acquiesced. Oh, good. Wow.
They didn't fire people for it. But that speaks to resiliency. It speaks to a sense of your own sense of person. I would never have thought about Marilyn Monroe in those terms back in when I first heard about her. I think she'd be a little bit more meek and a little bit more follow and do whatever it takes to maybe be in that spot. She wasn't afraid to walk away and stand up to some of the studio heads.
When you think about all of those women role models, Katharine Hepburn, I mean, you look at what they were brilliant. They were twice as good as the men, in my opinion, because they probably had to be. And they were pioneers in business. And in some ways, you look at Oprah, you look at some of the people that we have now that are very similar storylines. Oprah had teen pregnancy issue, but I actually had the DVD series of Oprah's 20 years anniversary series. I gave it away, but I watched every single one of them. I had no idea how tough she was asking. She was the only Black person like in the studio, and she's interviewing white people, and she didn't shirk the hard questions. And so Oprah came out of what Marilyn started.
Yeah, and she did. And also, there's these people that come into being on Earth, whether it be Oprah, Marilyn Monroe, Princess Diana, and they cross all lines. They don't have kind of like a skin color or everybody loves them. So the same thing with Marilyn. There's a allure to her. With Oprah, it's a different type of allure, but it's still an allure to Oprah being able to cross those lines and show up as Oprah, not show up as Oprah trying to be Martha Stewart.
Right.
Well, that's what they try to do. They try to be something that they're not. I can't tell you, I'm sure you have as a marketing person, oh, Nina, can you help me become Oprah? I'm like, no, I can help you become you.
Well, and you understand that that's what the benefit is of these times, I think, is that social media changed how everyone is seen. You have to be authentic. And and there used to be, oh, I'm this way on Facebook and I'm this way on LinkedIn. It's be who you are and embrace your zaniness and your quirkiness and share it, because you're a piece of the puzzle. You wouldn't be here at this time if it wasn't important to be here, right?
Yeah, it's so true. It is so true. There's another actress I want to highlight is the woman who plays Ella Fitzgerald in this new episode. She is a jazz singer. She's a transformer in her own right. She has something called mulatto math that helps bridge the races, because she has a Irish Catholic mother and a very, from the South, Georgia, African American father.
Father.
Okay.
Wow.
So, and she's married to a British Jewish man. So that's a lot of blending. You know what I mean? That's a
Oh
lot
my
of
God.
bringing it all together, so to speak. But she really does
Wow.
help in this time that we need to wake up, and we do need to wake up to um, what makes us special, but also being able to bridge those and have those kind of conversations that are sometimes difficult to have.
Yep.
We
Yep.
all have, regardless if we're black, white, in between, there's prejudice across all races. It's not just white with black people.
Right. Right.
Everybody has prejudice.
Right. It's conditioning. And
Yeah.
we get to look at the patterns and conditioning that we have and decide if they still serve.
Yes.
So I want to go back to PTSD, trauma, and what we're seeing now, because there is this past 2 years has caused a lot of mental health flare-ups, if you want to call it that. Huge. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It's the challenge that we have now is the fallout of these 2 years. Now moving into a world culture that is beyond filled with fear, because you have a Russian leader who is threatening safety. What was the coronavirus? Threatening safety. So I think this is one of those times that if we do not create better mental health and addiction resources, there is a systemic problem, because in 1962 they didn't have the resources we have today.
Right.
Yet we're at beyond epidemic levels. It's moved, I think, from 30 a couple of months ago, 30% suicide rate in the last year, to 40%, almost 40% suicide rate. Look at those numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you think about that in the hundreds of thousands, it's actually a quick second to some of the biggest diseases that kill people, from heart disease to cancer to the coronavirus. It really is right behind there. So we have to start to wake up and learn how to manage our own energy, learn how to tap into the right sources, but also find where the gap is, because there's a huge gap in what is provided and what is not happening. And I'd like to see where that gap is and be able to fill in the gap, because if you don't fill in the gap, you can have all the resources in the world, but if people are not getting help by them, where's the problem? Where's the real problem? And I'd like to seek that out as a next step for us, because there's plenty of resources, but and there's also a gap between, there's people that, let's say if you're homeless and you have addiction or mental health issues, there's help. And then they've got the high-end help. So for example, if you are a celebrity or if you're wealthy, you can go to these rehab centers. It's that middle ground that I'm also more concerned with, because if I'm a single mom who's got an addiction problem, there's no way I can leave my 2 kids and go away for 30, 60, 90 days and work on me. Who's going to take care of my kids? So guess what? I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Right. Well, it's coping. I mean, basically what you're talking about is there is a fear virus that is deadly, that is affecting the whole world. And we have all sorts of ways of dealing with it, but the ways of dealing with it are not getting the attention that they should. The attention is still going back on the cause, not on the cure. And what you're doing is you're trying to bring attention to the cure.
Well, I love what you're saying, because when you talk about the coronavirus, if you want to talk in energy terms, that's your heart chakra, right? Respiratory system. So you've got a physical ailment that is killing people. But then you have a secondary issue of the coronavirus, and it's your heart chakra with the relationships that are being destroyed. People are saying, you know what, I'm not going to talk to that person because if they either get vaccinated or don't get vaccinated, they're out of my life. You're wrong, I'm right. What is that doing? It's killing relationships. We've got to do a better job of getting curious and listening and understanding. Because the one thing I do know about the coronavirus is what I don't know. And it's a lot. And we're not going to know a lot for a long time. And here's the thing, whether you think you should get vaccinated or you shouldn't get vaccinated, do you want to come from a place of love, or do you want to come from a place of judgment? And that's where so that's the secondary issue that the coronavirus is actually doing for people. And I would hope that people will take a second look at that, because you know what, for me in my life, I've encouraged people to really come from a place of love, even if you have different viewpoints of what you think you should do.
Right, right. Well, the thing is, this is in so many ways, we were so focused on the external, and this lockdown period gave us a chance to focus on the internal, and everything inside is projecting outside. So the wars or the combats you have with your family or another country, it's in here. And so what you're basically talking about is how do we heal? That's what I would like people to understand, is that what Nina's doing is she's really giving people a chance to look at, through storytelling, maybe through historical fact. It's a deeper story. It's a deeper meaning. It's a deeper access to our new world, that this conflict, it's either male female, right wrong, all this polarity. We're supposed to be in 0 point in the middle, and we all fall out. We wouldn't even be here in human form if we weren't supposed to experience this.
The yin and the yang. Yeah.
Well, it's that's what you're saying, is like my way or the highway. This furious anger of frustration projected out is really inner work, in my opinion. And that's where all of these resources that you're talking about for mental health, they work on the inner work, the therapy, and even with the 12-step programs and all of that, it's inner work and for self-forgiveness, so that you're not spewing it out, right?
It's so true, and it's a hard one, because we want to blame somebody. We want to blame the outside world, and this is an inner job. And that's the other thing that I think is really important when you utilize somebody's life for life lessons. Back in my kind of career, I used to take movie themes and talk about them as they relate to life. And I think, oh my gosh,
Cool.
here I am now doing the same thing. It just happens to be a celebrity's life, not the movie itself. And there's lots of lessons that we can learn. But I think for anybody that might be watching in their own life and asking themselves, I'm really angry right now, or I'm feeling a lot of fear, is to find some tools to be able to, in that moment, be able to help you restore that calm. Because the thing I do know, and this isn't woo-woo, this is just science, is what I focus on expands. So if I keep on focusing on my fear, I'm going to get a lot more fear. If I keep on focusing on my judgment or my anger, I'm going to keep on getting that. And so I think even in my own life, I've had to, over the last few months, is really let go of my attachments of how I think other people should be in the world.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and again, the other side of this, and I may be a little Pollyanna, but everyone's here for a purpose. There's 8 billion people on this planet right now, while we're going into a new position in the solar system, while we're changing from war mentality to peace. And it is the age of Aquarius. We're in it. There's nothing that's scientific. That's astrology. And this has been pre-seen, talked about since the indigenous
Yes.
people from Uluru. So it's not like we just can't use the same operating systems that we've been using, I don't believe, to go to the next level. And again, Nina, when you were talking about, death and everything, the fear of death is the biggest fear. And we had to look at it during this whole time. And are you happy with what you did? Are you ready to go? Did you fulfill your life mission? All of that. And so that's part of what people's, I think, their sadness, depression and sadness is, no, I haven't. I don't know how.
Yeah, it's so true. That's why I think, the one thing I would say is it's never too late.
Right.
I look at some of my clients that are, 40 years old and they're not going to take a chance, or 25 years old and they're not going to take a chance. And then I've got 72-year-old, 75-year-old that are like an 82-year-old that's just jumping out of plane. You know what I mean? Going for it. So I think the key here is also, where's your mindset? What are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the doom and gloom? Or are you focusing on the possibility and who you can become from it? I think the challenge is the breakdown is always the most uncomfortable. So you have to be willing to go through the uncomfortableness. I know for myself, I've even had to go through my own uncomfortableness with relationships shifting, and how can I rely on myself more in my own truth versus, the people pleaser in me that wants everybody to be happy. The reality is, what? Not everybody's going to be happy, and it's not your job to make everybody happy.
Right. But it's your job to make you happy, so that, right, and balanced.
That AA term, as the serenity prayer, God grant me the ability to change the things I can, right? Accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that, that's one of those things for people that are in the service or helping profession, is to understand that you've got to know the difference between when you should step in and when you can't. But I can always be kind, and I can always come from a place of empathy and support, even if I'm not that person that's going to be supporting them. And I think that's a real important thing for people that might be watching or listening and saying, gosh, how do I get myself out of this? And it's step by step, and accepting where you are, I think, is one of the best ways. Doesn't mean you're going to stay there. Doesn't mean you should emphasize it and fortify it, but just accepting that maybe you don't know and you're scared.
Right. And that's part of coaching. Most of the time it's like, okay, let's look at this wheel, and where are you on each facet of your life, right? But so tell me a little bit more about addiction and what you're hoping. You basically, you're going to have 6 episodes. You've done episode 1, and right?
Yeah, there's a podcast, and the docuseries hasn't come out. We go
okay. So
we go into the docuseries this summer. And so one of the things that we're doing in the docuseries deals specifically with what happened to her, kind of the resilience of who she was, and mental health. So there is the specifics and what makes us different, because there's been tons and tons of stuff out there. And I want to give this to the audience because it's actually very representative of what's going on in the media today.
Okay.
So you have 6 decades of rumor that has been out there.
Right.
So I went into this project, and it was why it's so fascinating. To me, the truth is actually more fascinating than the rumors that are out there. Yeah. I went into thinking that, just like everybody that has stayed on the surface of Marilyn, I'm not talking about the true Marilyn fans that know and love her and really kind of know the truth of the specific facts.
Okay.
But for the average American or world person, because she's a world global phenomenon, anybody watching a Marilyn Monroe biography or reading a book, how they do this is what they do is they bring in a fact, they bring in potential theory that could have happened to her, and then they bring out outlandish rumor. And me as the viewer or me as the reader don't know which is which, and it's presented as a truth.
Oh, no.
So if you look at the media today, you have a lot of commentary out there. We have social media, and everybody wants to be the first to tell the story. So I can tell you, I mean, sometimes in my browser, I have 5 different headlines, and they're all saying something different. So where's the truth? Where's the hook headline? And where is maybe a theory, but they don't tell you that. They tell you it if it's a fact.
Right.
So now we're living in this quick fix society. I want to look at my phone and get just the top headline. Marilyn Monroe was murdered. Marilyn Monroe had an affair with Bobby Kennedy and JFK. When you start to peel back the onion, you start to look at what is fact that we can actually prove today. What could be a theory and what is an outlandish rumor?
Right.
So I'm going to give you an outlandish rumor. So this is one of the most shocking ones because, like I said, I went into it thinking Marilyn Monroe was murdered. There is multiple documentaries out there, probably even books that speak to this, that talk about how the housekeeper, Eunice Murray, was washing the sheets in the middle of the night. I took that as true. It was a police officer that said it. Okay. So of course it was true. Okay. Well, the challenge with that, and the reason why she was washing the sheets at the middle of the night, is that she was given a suppository and or enema, and they had to clean out the evidence. So they're washing the sheets, getting rid of the evidence. Comes to find out that Marilyn Monroe moved into her house in January of 62. She died in August of 62. She hadn't finished, actually hadn't even really, didn't even have furniture in the house. She sent her laundry out. Comes to find out, Marilyn Monroe didn't have a washer and dryer in her house.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I'm talking about. It's like, so when you look at documentaries that have been done 2 to 3 years ago on major networks, our documentaries, we had a panel, the expert panel, that these guys are good. So Gary Vitaco Robles is the author of Marilyn Behind the Icon.
Okay.
And basically the traumatic podcast that we're doing around her life is based on his books. He's
Okay.
also a mental health professional, along with other Marilyn experts that I'm telling you, they know details that you and I wouldn't even know about some of the closest people in my life. So that's how well detailed they are, right? And they'll call you out. If you get it wrong with Marilyn, they're going to call you out, right? But you sit there and you look at the level of detail that is actually known, and you start to look back and you're going, okay, wait a minute. It's kind of like what's happening now. We wanted to believe all these things that have been said in the media, and now we're waking up to the truth. Just this last year, I even said to my producers, I said, I wonder if people want to know the truth, because it's easier for me to think and believe that she had affairs with both President Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy, when really and truly there's a lot of evidence that speaks that, yeah, she probably had at least 1 or 2 times with JFK as an affair. But the way that they have portrayed it as if she was this love-struck teenager is a bunch of bull. The other thing is there is no evidence except for rumor that speaks to her having an affair with Bobby Kennedy. There's also fact that speaks to her talking about Bobby Kennedy and actually saying to people she didn't find him appealing or attractive. The other thing is she knew Ethel Kennedy. And the thing that you have to understand about Marilyn is, as much as she did have affairs with married men, she also respected family. So there's the dichotomy, right? So if she were to have an affair with Bobby Kennedy, she would have then had to go behind Ethel Kennedy's back, which she had correspondence and an affection and a fondness for, which isn't where Marilyn wanted to be a mother more than anybody. So she admired Ethel Kennedy, whereas Jacqueline Kennedy, she didn't come into contact with. So I'm making that distinction because the people that have claimed that she had an affair with Bobby Kennedy, there's nothing that actually supports it. And the people that did say it are not credible.
Wow. Well, that whole time period, I mean, the assassination of JFK, and there's just so much stuff that doesn't add up. So that's why it's like there was, the media just glossed over it and went on to the next thing instead of really going deep in it. Just like what I said, I'm working on a project with the Paul McCartney's murder in 1966. And I mean, the data is...
No, when you're saying the Paul McCartney still alive, when you were saying that.
No, he was replaced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, I can share that. Yeah, in fact, let's talk afterwards. Yeah, it's wild. That's what I'm saying is that when people have gone deep, just like your people have into Maryland, and they pull every newspaper article they can find, every picture, everything, and then they actually some some of this stuff, I don't know if there's that many people that were that told that gave the truth about Marilyn before they passed, but there's got to be witnesses that
Well,
gave
the good
God.
news is there's a gentleman named Anthony Summers who has tapes on Marilyn Monroe, and he will be part of a documentary that's coming out that will actually probably air some of those, and those are really wonderful, and we've listened to them as well. And I think one of the things that you're going to hear, and the great thing is a lot of those people are now gone, and so to hear it firsthand, you start to piecemeal. You don't have to deal with hearsay because they were actually interviewed 20 years after her death. Now we're looking at 40 more years after that, so some of these people are really well long gone. And the great news about that, though, is you get to really hear, for example, there's a lot of rumor around Calneva, and that was a place that Marilyn was a week before she died. Lot of speculation, and a lot of people can make up stories now because of 60 years later. So
Right.
you can make up that you were there. Who's going to tell you that you're not, right? And if you feel or look credible, or you came from that time period, it's easy to then match you to that person. Another gentleman that I always say don't throw out the baby with the bathwater is a guy named Robert Slater. He started a lot of the rumors that were out there. Now, here's the thing. He's also the one that got the Los Angeles DA office to actually reopen the case. So as I said, he brought some benefit to it, but one of the claims that he made was that he was married to Marilyn Monroe. Oh my gosh. The picture that he showed everybody was a publicity shot on the film of Niagara. He was never married to her. And then you could prove where Marilyn was and where he was when he said that the day that he married her. She was not even, they weren't even together.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. I mean, it's mind-boggling how much people have benefited from making up stories around Marilyn. But I understand it. You've got sex, you've got power, you've got a death, you've got a mystery. Why did she die? There's a connection. I mean, I understand why.
So do you feel like she was murdered, or do you feel like she overdosed?
I went into it thinking that she was murdered. I am actually pulling off that. I am going to tell you there is a cover up. There is a cover up, but I also am open. I'm not one to say she was murdered or she was overdosed, but I will say this is that at this point in the investigation, regardless if something more nefarious has happened to Marilyn Monroe, the one thing that we do know is that her doctors in 1962 might not have been brought up with charges, but in 2022, these doctors would be put up and probably brought up on charges. Marilyn Monroe should never have been given Nebutol and chloral hydrate together. 3 months before she died, she was prescribed 900 pills. 700 of them were sleeping pills. Okay, when you look at that, unbelievable. Their methods of how they negotiated, Dr. Greenson and Dr. Engelberg. Greenson was her psychiatrist, and Engelberg was her internist. And those two dropped off their communication. Dr. Greenson would, go into Marilyn's and see the bottle of pills, and he would pour half of them in his pocket. And that was his way of being able to help her, but the kind of treatment that they gave stars back then was not the right treatment, particularly for Marilyn's acute mental disorder. She was diagnosed with bipolar. She was diagnosed with depressive disorder. She probably would have been diagnosed with borderline personality. So I'm not going to say she would have been for sure, but she definitely displayed those kind of types of characteristics. So when you look at that tied together and you're getting no sleep, you're getting these actual medication that actually works against the type of mental illness that you have, it made her problem that much more amplified than actually helping her. So it became the very thing that she sought to help with her sleep became the very difficulty that kept her up. And the day that she died, she was definitely sleep deprived. She was upset. She was cranky. She literally was not happy for part of that day. She didn't eat only, I think it was a grapefruit that day. She didn't have a lot in her system. I want to tell everybody, if you see a documentary that says she was drinking that day or that she was pregnant and she got an abortion, both of those things are not true.
Wow. So how truthful do you think the media is now? If a lot of that, I mean, this is what we're trying to learn lessons from all of this.
Yeah.
And it's not just talking about the fear virus and getting people help, but how does anyone know the truth? I personally don't watch the news. I don't have it on the television. But I can still get the news.
No, and I think that's a really good point. And so the Marilyn story is a microcosm of what's happening today in
Right.
some ways. You've got people that believe one thing or another. Same thing with Marilyn's story. You know, I either believe she was murdered or that she overdosed. Where I think we will get better at as a society is that you've got to put on your critical thinking skills and ask yourself, is this true? And if you ask yourself and you don't get a hell yes it is, right? Are you open enough to look at the possibility of something else being more truthful? What happens is that we want to feel safe. So in the media, if I turn on the news and our president or somebody else that's a world leader or some type of a newscaster that I trust, and he or she says, this is the way it is, I now start believing that narrative. And I'm going to say it's a narrative.
Right.
It may be the truth and it may be just a belief system. And so you have to be willing to question your belief systems. Just like in some ways with the Marilyn story, I went into it thinking she was murdered. And now I'm kind of going, you know what? I think that regardless of what happened to her, you know, there is a lot of evidence at this point, evidence-wise, that speaks to her overdosing. And so when you look at that, if you're not open to looking at the other side, and a lot of the Marilyn fans, if you believe one side, you're not going to believe the other, and vice versa. So that cognitive dissonance goes into seeking the truth based on my belief system instead of seeking the truth. So I have to be open. The reason why I'm not giving you a definite answer is because I'm in the middle of the investigation and my eyes are starting to open to other things. And I'll give you an example. Prior to 6 months ago, I would have said to you that probably Bobby Kennedy was in LA the day that she died, but it doesn't mean that he killed her. And what I mean by that is if any president that had, ties at the highest level in terms of Camelot, who are married Catholic men with children, there is no way in the world, if that was our president today, and all of a sudden, Jennifer Aniston or Angelina Jolie or any of these high Jennifer Lopez died, and they were associated on any level with the president, the government would have come in and cleared out any evidence. They just are going to do that. That's what they do.
Right.
So there is a cover up to some degree that we have to, there's these gray areas, which makes it very highly susceptible to conspiracy theories. But conspiracy theories are built on, there's some type of cover up. People can feel it. So what's the cover up? So people keep trying to get to the truth. But if I'm not open to really seeing that truth. So the Marilyn experts, as we get ready for the 60th anniversary of her death, we're actually going to be looking at several books that have been published over the last couple of years. There is proof now. So there's a rumor that says that Bobby Kennedy was with Peter Lawford in the middle of the day at, Marilyn's house trying to talk to her. And then she became so distraught that she killed herself. That's one of the rumors. Okay. Well, now there's proof, physical proof, photo proof that actually Bobby Kennedy was sitting on a horse in the San Jose mountains with not just his family, but 2 other families. That's proof. That's not hearsay. That's proof. If you got a picture with all these people, that's a hard thing to have to say. you know what? I can definitely tell you at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Saturday, he was not at Marilyn Monroe's house. You see what I'm saying?
So back then, though, this is maybe a stupid question, but the the cleanup for JFK may have caused a lot of these rumors to start, right?
Well, I
Or,
don't think it was just that. I think it was there was rumors about them having an affair even before she passed. So that was already out in the media. There was, you know, some of these very famous press people. There was media out there talking about the rumors of hush hush, etc. So, and there is a very much of a probably a probability that in March of '62 that you could put them at the same place at the same time, and there was notions of the fact that they could have had an affair. You know, I'm not saying I wasn't there, I wasn't in the room. So, and that's the other thing, you got a lot of people acting as if they're there. So unless you're in the room, unless you have a firsthand
yeah,
account,
you have no idea what's going
so
on.
be open to the possibility. I think the challenge with it is, and I feel for the Marilyn, true Marilyn diehard fans that really know a lot of the truth. I think they get frustrated with the murder theories because they're so outlandish, and so they just start to shut down. And my job as a journalist, an investigative journalist in this case, is to hold open. Why does this person think that there's a murder here? And where is the evidence? So I could put it in three buckets. It's a fact, it could be a probable theory or an outlandish rumor. And my goal is to help people see it in those buckets so they don't get all three jammed together, that they can make up their own mind based on these elements, not just a book that's being brought together as if it's fact, or a docu-series that has an agenda and a storyline that they want to get to.
How hard is it to do this 60 years later?
Well, you got 60 years of rumors. And so, unlike, let's say, a Michael Jackson or a Britney Spears who's still alive that has a story, you only have a decade, let's say, of of all this buildup. And but when somebody dies and there's a mystery behind their death, there's a correlation with the most powerful family in the world at that time, right? It is just a rumor mill that just ignites. And so you've now got book after book, documentary after documentary that has slanted it so much in the cultural fabric that it becomes almost impossible to get people to go, can you come to the story with fresh mind,
Right.
fresh heart, and fresh eyes to say to yourself, maybe what I think happened to her may not even be at all what happened to her.
Wow.
And are we willing to see the truth, and do we want to see the truth? That's something that I'm not exactly sure yet. It's kind of like what's happening in the macro society. There are people that do not want to see the truth about some of the things that are right in front of us, and yet we want to look the other way and say kumbaya, or what this person's telling us. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, every single president has done this. They make promises, and then what do? They don't fulfill them. And we go, okay, let's sign up for this another 4 years, and let's sign up for this another 4 years and another 4 years. And we're not really willing, or maybe we don't have the bandwidth to really look at the truth. It's hard to look at the truth. It's hard to think that, maybe there's lies in the midst of the commentary. We want to believe our governments. We want to believe the media. But I think there's so much rubbish out there and so much narrative that it's not really a fact. It's a belief system. And we've gotten away from the innocence of what the media was supposed to do, which was to give us information.
Well, I think that is a wonderful way for us to consider what you're doing. It's a huge gift. It's going to give us new eyes and new ways of looking at things. And that's what this whole time period is about. You said something about how does it feel? Well, you feel it in your gut or you feel it here. It's not about just this anymore, right?
And Kathy, the one last thing I'd like to say about Marilyn, and really probably my mission here more than ever, is Marilyn at the heart of who she was a human being that really wanted to love and to be loved. and at the heart of all of us,
Yes.
regardless of what our different belief systems are, our different colors, or different, religious beliefs, most of us really just want that as well.
Yes.
And I think we've gotten so caught up in technology and so much in the innovation that we've lost sight of our hearts. And going back to the coronavirus, I think we have to go back to the simplicity of our hearts, because Marilyn, at the end of the day, I think one of the reasons why she's still just as popular, if not more so, is that she's a reminder of our vulnerability and our ability to be human. And I think that's the message that I would like to leave with, is that Marilyn, just like all of us, is a human being just wanting to love and to be loved.
Perfect. Perfect. So many great quotes here. I'm going to have to go back and listen to you again, because so much of this is so, even though it was 60 years ago, this project is so valid, and it's going to help so many people today, because we're looking for the truth, and we can take the truth.
Yeah, I like that.
I
hope you're right.
Yeah, well, this is my way I usually end these conversations. Is I want to remind everyone that we're more powerful than we really know we are, and to really look at this conversation about what Marilyn went through, and she modeled it perfectly for us, that she had a goal and she went for it, and she didn't let anything impede her. So, and the truth will be revealed. Nina's going to help us see as much as we can during this time period on her podcast. And it's beyond,
Behindtheicon.com. So,
beyond,
oh,
beyond.
not beyond, behind. It's behind.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I have it down wrong then. I'll put it in right. Okay.
Beyond the icon. Yeah, it could be on. It is beyond the icon. A lot of our own life themes. So yeah, behind the icon. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll fix that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So, but everyone, please, how's the best way to reach you, Nina? So
Yeah,
that
you know
people
what I
can
would
learn
love
more.
is if everybody can go to behindtheicon.com. You will get a very real glimpse into the star, and it starts with their childhood and bounces around in terms of time, but you'll hear, and then there's a back end commentary that the producers and I talk about that episode, etc. So Soul Sisters just launched. That was the 9th episode. So now we're going to move into our behind the commentary. But then I'm actually just announcing this. Even the Maryland fans don't know this yet, is we are getting ready to gear up for the 60th anniversary special investigation. So some of the elements that we'll bring into the TV docuseries will actually be flushed out in the special investigation around these books that have been out there that, gosh, I mean, these guys, I read some of these books and I thought, oh my gosh, they sound so true. And it's like, to listen to these experts just peel back the details is
Thank
really
goodness.
interesting.
Thank goodness you have the experts, and thank goodness you're going to bring it to light. That's what a lot of this time period is about, illuminating the truth. So it's just perfect. Thank you so much. And again, want to make sure everyone knows that it's behindtheicon.com. And look and watch what Nina does, because I think she's going to be someone to watch. This is just the beginning of this journey. So thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So bye for now. Thank you everyone for coming. Bye-bye.